Happy Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. All in crypto here, and welcome back, guys, for another jam-packed daily market update. We are going to be kicking things off with what a general partner at Pantera Capital, a major investor in the cryptocurrency space, has to say in regards to the current price action that we're witnessing. Is this just a pullback, which is camp one, or is this the start of a bear market? I would say actually probably the start of the bear market is camp one. I think a lot of retail is leaning more towards that opinion. Of course, you guys know that I still believe this is just a pullback. I ultimately don't think that the cryptocurrency markets have held up too badly considering everything the traditional markets have had to contend with, having their kind of bear market earlier this year being defined by a 20% plus pullback for the S&P. That's been entirely engulfed. I think brighter days are ahead for markets more broadly, and I kind of agree with, or very much agree with, what Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson is putting out there in regards to this being a bull market, and this is, at least by them, an expected pullback for the markets that we ultimately climb out of. And we'll listen to what Cosmo has to say over from Pantera. Then also to kind of put this pullback and some of the outflows that we're seeing with the Bitcoin ETFs into perspective, it's only 2.5% of the Bitcoin ETFs have actually left. So people have withdrawn their money from these ETFs. 97.5% are still hanging in. I would say it's more of an institutional elk that's investing via IBIT. Not entirely, but probably majority is larger money. We are getting news that the number of Bitcoin whales is surging on this pullback. People are buying the dip. And then we'll talk about a number of other interesting things, such as sort of global money creation, global central bank assets, which have continued to wane. There is a pivot coming on the macro. We think ultimately this all filters into a good picture. And of course, you do have NVIDIA's earnings today. You also have, I believe, I don't know if it's FOMC or it's some comments being made by Jerome Powell. Either way, they're going to be impactful to the markets. We did see the probabilities of a rate cut in December actually drop below 50%. They're now in and around it. We'll see what takes place. But as promised, let's start off with what Pantera Capital have to say about the current market price action.
Is this crypto winter coming early here?
Look, we just had a long 6-month rally, so some consolidation I think is very reasonable. Crypto tends to have these characteristics of risk-on assets, so it's also pulling back on macro action. And you guys have just talked about the large macro concerns like the AI capex fear causing the equity pullback, the fears around credit, the fears around the Fed's plan for rate cuts. And because Bitcoin is a higher growth asset, it also has higher downsides. I think to put it in context, Bitcoin has seen multiple 30% drawdowns during any typical uptrend because of that higher volatility. I'd say it's too early to call whether we're entering a sustained downtrend, but certainly this would be relatively typical for any drawdown.
At what point, as you do see these drawdowns in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies right now, at what point does it become a broader issue? You just mentioned macro that ricochets across other margins due to margin calls and the like.
So what we already saw is that a lot of the leverage has been taken out of the Bitcoin ecosystem recently. Earlier in October, crypto had its own idiosyncratic issue with a large deleveraging event. And so we've already seen a lot of that pain has already happened with the deleveraging. Now, naturally, as things go down, there is a little bit of negative reflexivity and certainly market sentiment that drives it. But we feel pretty strongly that, especially now that 16% of Bitcoin is held by institutions, which is up from basically 0% last cycle, we think Bitcoin is going to be increasingly less sensitive to and less likely to have volatility. And over time, that a 30% drawdown is actually it will become larger and larger. Will feel larger and larger over time. We'll see smaller and smaller drawdowns.
Yeah, to your point, just the fact that Harvard University's endowment fund is now holding Bitcoin exchange traded ETFs kind of says it all, doesn't it, in terms of institutional flows into the asset space.
Very interesting. Perhaps we played that because it aligns with our own personal view on what's taking place in the cryptocurrency space right now. I think it's a lot more brutal for altcoins, although BTC DOM, ironically, is now coming down, just on the context of Bitcoin actually outperforming altcoins to the downside, which is very non-typical. But our view is still very much, and we're yet to be proven right on this. We've been proven right 1, 2, 3, 4 times thus far as Bitcoin continues to uptrend. Will we be right the 5th time? And is this going to just be a pullback and a broader uptrend is ahead? At the end of the day, people that are investing in the crypto markets have to make a decision. You're either in or out. It's up to you. And that decision needs to be made, and you need to go with what you think is more probable. The hardest thing to do in the markets is make a decision. If you think we're entering a prolonged bear market and that you're going to have a chance at substantially lower prices and there isn't going to be any kind of recovery for crypto for a year, typically in a bear market plus, then by all means, do what you've got to do. I am still on the side that this recovers. And ultimately, time will tell. But this is still a kind of atypical pullback thus far in Bitcoin's uptrend. I think, interestingly, one thing I want to show you guys is there's a lot of fear right now about outflows. And you're always going to get inflows and outflows. This is part of any asset. This is from Eric Ballantune. He says, Bitcoin ETFs with 250 million in outflows. 3 billion out in the past month alone. That's about 2.5% of the total assets. 97.5% is still hanging in there. Still, $23 billion year to date, which is amazing. People forget just how much lifting was done 18 months prior to the sell-off. And told not too bad, or all told not too bad, considering the extreme fear mood right now. I think the reality doesn't reflect retail sentiment. From my own point of view, and I'm perhaps a good barometer for sentiment, it very much feels like people are just over the crypto markets. This is the reality of being an altcoin investor, I'm afraid, guys. You need to hang in there when others don't. If that's the route that you want to take and you sort of hope that glory is ahead of you. You know, I've been the beneficiary of that glory twice now, 2017, 2020, 2021. And I do believe we still have that broad sort of alt season price appreciation for altcoins to come. Certainly once we get over this hump, as it were, that has a lot of sort of macro factors baked into it. We also have, as Pantera was saying, that reflexivity, that kind of what we called ripple after the liquidation of facts still playing out. But I think this paints a slightly different picture to what's being told in regards to what's taking place. This is from Bitcoin Archive. Bitcoin Wells bought the dip below 100K. And in pretty staggering numbers, I must add. There is perhaps an interesting correlation, though, with Bitcoin and the Bitcoin whales. This is from Eric Ballantune. Is Bitcoin a leading indicator of stocks? We look into it, and no, not really. In fact, stocks were positive 62% of the time after a down month in Bitcoin. And it's very interesting. There's been a bit of a discorrelation. If you look at, I think we've got a money supply thing here, which people use as liquidity. I think there's more things that go into liquidity as a whole. Talking about global liquidity. There was a lot of people talking about how Bitcoin moves perfectly with M2. That perhaps hasn't quite been the case recently. And I think there's internal things going on. Another interesting sort of post here from Eric Ballantune, actually commenting on someone's post. There's a nice chart from an individual who posts or persists the question of whether all altcoin ETFs mark the top. My 2 cents, short-term def looks like it did. Long-term, though, not that meaningful. There are big boy issuers playing a very long game. And retail plays a short game. Ultimately, in my opinion, more institutional investors probably see the value in this technology and where it's going and want a piece of that and are ultimately willing to wait for enough retail to be shaken out, which I ultimately believe is what's happening now, to... they're willing to play that game. And I think that's very much what we see taking place. Some interesting news from the OCC, so the Comptroller of Currencies in the United States. The OCC confirms permissible bank activity related to paying crypto asset network fees, sometimes referred to as gas fees. Read more. So more and more progress. Some interesting things happening on the macro. We looked at Ray Dalio's stimulating into a bubble thesis where he ultimately says that assets are to do well due to the kind of QE that's coming. Crazy to think that money supply is expanding this aggressively, even as global central bank balance sheets have been contracting. We've seen $10 trillion increase in global money supply in the past 12 months. Now imagine what happens when central banks inevitably, it's been signaled, need to expand their balance sheets again, which is my view. In my view, is only a matter of time. If this happens, mute the recent volatility noise in hard assets. This is the macro data point that ultimately drives the cycle, in my view. And I happen to agree. So we remain on the camp that this is just a pullback for BTC until proven otherwise. It's not my base case that this is a bear market. that we're now in. If we are going to enter one, you're still early in that if it's to play out in a traditional fashion. And if people want out of the markets, I do believe there's time for them to do so. And you need to make a decision. There's no point being held captive. I think I see a lot of negativity in the cryptocurrency space. You've got to do what's right for you at this point. For me, based on my own personal situation, I'm a happy hodler. I see ultimate value in this technology. I do just think this is a pullback and we have another uptrend to come. We beat the bears back in start of 2025, in 2024, twice, and also right at the start here when we were starting to accumulate our positions. And we've been right broadly on the space. Fortunately for altcoins, it's been a bit of a choppy ride, but given the context of what's happening in the broader markets, I think that's quite understandable. I think that's explainable in regards to what's happened to alt season. You're getting this very interesting thing happening right now. We've been very right on BTC Dom, and I think this does enter a broader downtrend. Interestingly, though, it's not the traditional context of BTC Dom rolling and everything doing well. Bitcoin perhaps having more internal issues. It could be rotation, perhaps, that we're seeing. That is a possibility. It could also just be that there's more sort of money in Bitcoin causing it to sell off more than altcoins that are pretty lackluster, certainly given the $20 billion largest ever liquidation event that took place only a few Fridays ago. And I think, as Pantera Capital says, there's still that reflexivity to that whole event that still ultimately needs to be worked out. So today I will be doing a live meeting with my Patreons. I know, ultimately, I think what I try and put across is my views, and that view can hopefully help individuals to make their own opinions. I know, personally speaking, that some people are just done with crypto and want out the markets, and I think that's fair enough. Ultimately, we'll weigh those options up for them on a non-advisory basis. We're not a financial advisor. Nothing we say or do here is financial advice. But if you do think a bear market is coming, you've got two choices. You either sell and buy lower, or you hold through it. They're your two options. You need to make that decision based on your own personal circumstances. You guys know, ultimately, and I don't want to mince my words here at all. It's my opinion that we've got a great time ahead of us, and that this is just a pullback. Today, I will be talking about this with Patreons. You do have Nvidia's earnings. The largest ever options expiry for this, it's about $370 billion is behind this, or going to depend on this and what happens. This is going to happen after the bell. Also, you're going to have Jerome Powell, I believe, speaking today. I'll just verify that for you whilst I've got you all here. But yeah, hang in there, guys. Ultimately, bright days are ahead for crypto. Here we go. FOMC member Moran speaking. Okay. FOMC minutes and FOMC Williams speaking. You've got the minutes. That's going to be the sort of publications of what they spoke about happening later. So you've got non-farm. Not non-farm. You've got Nvidia earnings and you've got the Fed minutes. We'll see how this affects the probability of interest rates, which I'll look at now for you. It's amazing how much of the internet actually went down yesterday because of one centralized player. Decentralization is the future. I believe I've got an interview coming out with MIT later today. So perhaps they are going to leave rates where they are. We'll see what happens. This is likely going to swing today in some way or another. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to love and leave you. Hang in there. Brighter days are ahead of us, I believe. Ultimately, some people very much have a decision to make. It's up to you what you choose to do. That's it from me, guys. I'm going to love and leave you. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you all soon.